Warning, today's episode contains spoilers. So if you have not seen the movie or TV show that we are talking about, we highly recommend that you watch it first, then listen to this episode. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Then Is Now podcast. I am your host, Rigor. In this series of special Then Is Now episodes, 13 Days of Hallowtober, we're exploring what are widely regarded as the scariest movies of all time. Joining me once again is filmmaker Chris Esper. Chris, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back again.
No problem. Awesome to have you here. Okay, so today's film is Demons from 1985, directed by Lamberto Bava. I'm going to give a brief synopsis first, and then we'll dive into the film itself.
The preview you are about to watch is for a movie that is unlike any you have ever seen before. It is for a movie that goes beyond temporary fear to everlasting terror. It is a movie called Demons. Yes, the demons are coming, and they're coming for you. Warning, if you have the courage to see demons, sit near an exit. Otherwise, you might never get out. In your theater, who will survive the touch of the demons, and who will not? Demons. With music by Billy Idol, Motley Crue, The Adventures, Rick Springfield, and Saxon. This is no dream. This is happening right now. And it could be happening to you. Demons. They will make cemeteries their cathedrals, and the cities will be your tombs. Will you survive it? Demons.
On the Berlin subway, a mysterious masked man offers university student Cheryl 2 tickets to a free screening at the Metropole, an isolated and recently renovated local cinema. Cheryl talks her friend Kathy into going with her. At the theater, they meet two preppy college boys, George and Ken. Other attendees of the screening include a blind man and his guide daughter, a married couple, a boyfriend and girlfriend, and a pimp named Tony along with his two prostitutes. One of the prostitutes, Rosemary, scratches her face with a bizarre mask that's on display in the lobby. The film being shown is a violent, disturbing horror film about four teenagers who discover an old tomb and dig up the grave of a 16th century fortune teller called Nostradamus. When the teenagers dig up Nostradamus' coffin, they find no body and instead an old book and a mask identical to the strange mask in the lobby. When one of the movie's characters puts the mask on and is scratched by it, just like Rosemary was, by its doppelganger, he then turns evil and slaughters his friends. Feeling ill, Rosemary goes to the bathroom where she transforms into a bloodthirsty red-eyed demon like the one in the film. Rosemary attacks her friend Carmen, who then transforms into a demon in front of the rest of the cinema-goers. The group of uninfected people race to any exit they can find, only to find that they've all been bricked in, making escape impossible. Although they attempt to barricade themselves in the balcony, many are attacked and infected by the demons. One of the demons escapes into the city where four punks break into the building through the back entrance. The punks are soon transformed into demons as well. It's a battle for survival as the demonic infestation spreads. So, Chris, when did you first see this and what was your first impression?
So this is actually kind of funny. So when we first started talking about doing this, you mentioned this movie, I'm thinking, oh yeah, that movie. I've seen that years ago. I went to go rewatch it for this. Evidently, I have not seen it. I must have got mixed up with another movie. So this was literally my first time seeing it, and
Oh, wow.
yes, so again, I didn't get a chance to finish watching the whole entire thing. What I did see of it, though, uh, there are a few things that come to mind. For one, for some reason, as I kept watching it, I kept thinking of the movie Popcorn from 1991. Have you seen that?
Yes, yes, long time ago.
I kept thinking of that movie the entire time, and then that's not, that's neither a good thing or a bad thing. It just kept popping into my head because with the very similar premise and that sort of thing. But this was fun. I thought this was a fun movie. It wasn't like something I could see myself repeatedly watching again and again. But it was one that I had a lot of fun with it. I enjoyed it. So I thought of Popcorn. I also thought of, for some reason, Dead Alive, Peter Jackson's
Oh,
movie.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, particularly the ending with all the brutal violence going on, and so it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it.
Excellent. Yeah, I remember seeing it at a screening in Boston with my parents. I think I was like 16, and I was just terrified. This movie is, for me, having seen it at such a young age, this is one of those movies that's always scared me, and I've had to have someone in the room with me when I'm watching it.
Oh wow!
Particularly the first half. The second half gets more into, more into action and gore, but the first half just
Sure.
for some reason always creeped me out. I mean, maybe the concept of being in a theater and having the demons come out of the screen is just terrifying.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. So yeah, that part of it I enjoyed. That sort of like meta story it has going on, like a movie within a movie. It's in a movie theater, so
Right.
that was a lot of fun because it's taking the concept and turning it on its head in a much different way.
Yes, absolutely. Now, this movie has an incredible pedigree behind it. You've got director Lamberto Bava, who is he is the son of Mario Bava, the king of Italian horror movies in the 1960s and 70s. And Bava's also directed, Lamberto has also directed Demons 2, as well as Demons 3 The Ogre, which I haven't actually seen, but it turns out Demons 3 wasn't planned as Demons 3. It was just a movie he did called The Ogre, but when they released it overseas, they called it Demons 3.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, he did a few lesser known films before this, like Blast Fighter and Devilfish and The Mask of Satan. And after he had also done those, as well as he did A Blade in the Dark and Monster Shark, he decided he wanted to do a trilogy about demons coming out of a movie screen, which was written by a guy named Dardano Sarcetti. And so the two got together, Lamberto and Dardano, and they discussed it, and they managed to get Dario Argento on board as producer. Now, Dario Argento, you may remember, is perhaps the king of... he's arguably the king of Italian horror films. We'll get into him in a second. But, yeah, so getting Argento on board as producer, the rest was history. I mean, what did you think of the direction of this film?
I thought the direction of it was very solid. Again, it was just a lot of fun, and I liked how it would sort of shift between the creepy, and then once you get to the ending, of course you get to the action, to the gore, and like even some of the effects even get silly in a good way, like when all the characters are on the Jeep and they're all driving away and they're shooting at all these infected people. They run over this what appears to be a dummy, and so like things like that I thought were fun because it takes everything we like about horror movies and puts it into this, which is great.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of those movies I would kind of classify as batshit crazy. And I just love movies that are just batshit crazy, where they throw the kitchen sink in and it's anything goes, and it's just insanity from beginning to end.
Right, yeah. Well, and like I said, when I was watching this, I thought of Dead Alive, which is another batshit crazy movie. I mean, I remember first seeing that, and, you get to the ending of that movie, again, same thing. You're just like, you're just glued to the screen because of all this craziness that's going on. Sometimes you may laugh, and other times you may just look at the screen, jaw, agape, because it's just like, what in the fuck is going on over here?
Right, exactly. Now, I just wanted to point out here that a guy named Michel Suavi was the second unit assistant director, and he went on to be a director himself, and perhaps he is most famous for 1994's highly underrated film Cemetery Man, which I think is a very good movie. And his name has popped up quite a bit in horror cinema, but Cemetery Man, I think, was his biggest hit because it was an international hit. Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, you got to add that to your list. That's a particularly good one. But this guy that keeps he's a gravedigger, and he keeps burying bodies, and they keep coming back, and he has to re-kill them and try and bury them again. And it's kind of a black comedy.
That sounds like fun. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's very fun. And then getting back to our producer, Dario Argento, again, we mentioned that he's the king of Italian horror films, and he's another one that we could do an entire show on, and we probably will someday. But the highlights of his directing career, and these are just highlights, we're scratching the surface here. He's done things like The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Deep Red, Cat o' Nine Tails, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which if you notice, there was a poster for this in the theater, and
Yes.
in Demons. Then he did the Three Mothers trilogy, Suspiria, Inferno, and Tenebra, as well as the movies Opera, Phenomena with Jennifer Connelly and Donald Pleasance. And he also did Two Evil Eyes. And this is just to name a few. I think even the Stendhal Syndrome is a more recent one that he's done. But his stamp is definitely on this film. I think in terms of the lighting, and it's just got that Argento lighting, even though Lamberto directed it. It's Argento's stamp is all over this film.
Yeah, I mean, his movies I actually need to see more of because I am not terribly familiar with his work. I mean, certainly heard of it, particularly Suspiria, which is probably among his most famous, of course. But one of the things that stood out to me, and this is probably just a staple of Italian films in general, but what really stood out for me was actually the dubbing that was going on here in this movie in Demons. There were parts of it that you could tell were obviously dubbed, but in a way, I don't know, something about that gives us some kind of charm to these movies, and you kind of it's like it almost doesn't feel right if it's not present, if that makes sense. It's strange.
Right, I agree actually, yeah. And if you notice, a lot of them were actually speaking English.
Yes, no, yeah, they were. I think what it was is they probably were speaking English. It sounded to me like they just got like American actors to just have, like American voices. So that's what it sounded like to me. I could be wrong.
No, I think you might be right. And also, it was very common back then for them not only to just shoot without recording the audio, and they would
Yes.
go back and dub the voices later, but to also, when it went overseas, they would have other people dubbing their voices for whatever reason.
Sure.
I think
yeah.
even what's his name, Franco Nero in the first Django movie is dubbed,
Oh yeah.
and it's not his own voice
Yeah.
speaking.
Well, I mean, even filmmakers like Sergio Leone and even Fellini, they were famous for not recording sound in their movies and just dubbing it later. It just became a staple of. I'm not necessarily sure if it's even foreign cinema or Italian cinema, but it became a staple for some reason, and it works.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and you're right. The dubbing does give it that charm. Even though, like, I find there's certain instances where I want to hear the original voices. By the same token, I enjoy hearing the dubbed versions because they're just, I don't know, they're a little bit more colloquial in English.
Yeah.
They manage to sometimes translate them into more lingo that we would understand,
Sure.
rather than just translating it verbatim.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we could get into a whole debate about whether people enjoy or don't enjoy reading subtitles. I mean, that's a whole other discussion. But
Yeah.
I personally never had a problem reading subtitles. Sometimes hearing the original language there's a certain elegance to whatever language the actors may be speaking in that moment. But nonetheless, even the dub movies, they work just as well for their own reasons.
Yeah. I found lately, too, in the past year or so, I start to put the closed captioning on no matter what I'm watching, whether it's an American show or a foreign show.
Sure.
And I find that because there's been so many times where I either get interrupted or I just didn't hear what the character said. And I look at my wife, I'm like, what did he say? What did she say? She's like, I don't know, rewind it.
Yeah.
So I just put the subtitles on, and that helps with that. But also it's interesting to watch the difference. For example, I just recently got a movie, I think I ordered it through Kino. It's called Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man.
Yes.
And it's an Italian film directed by Ruggero Deodato, who was infamous for doing Cannibal Holocaust. But anyways, it's this ultra-violent cop story. And when you watch it, and I had both the English dub and the English subtitles on, and they were both different. And the English subtitles were more literal translations of what they were saying, but the dubbing, which I guess was a newer dubbing than when it was first released, that's more colloquial English. So they're taking phrases in Italian and saying them in such a way that we understand them. Whereas if you translate it directly, it doesn't necessarily make sense.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really, it was an enjoyable movie. We'll have to do a show on that one at some point, too.
Yeah.
We'll return to 13 Days of Hallowtober after these messages. Hey, folks. I just wanted to take a minute here to tell you about the hosting service that we use at Haven Podcasts. Podserve.fm. Podcast hosting has never been easier. They do all the work to get your podcast on Apple Podcasts and other major podcast networks. They help you navigate the podcasting world, whether you're brand new or have years of experience. Folks, I can't tell you how happy I am with their service. When I first started this podcast, I searched around intensely for the right hosting platform. I found Podserve and used their simple 4-step process, and in a short amount of time, my podcasts were on the internet and available through all the major podcast networks. And their customer support is unreal. Every time I goof things up and make a mistake, like posting the wrong show to the wrong feed, I email them, and I kid you not, within minutes I get a response and the problem is resolved. And they're the only podcasting host that actually helps you get listeners. Other podcast hosts stop at podcast upload and don't help promote your podcast. Well, Podserve makes sure your podcast is seen by thousands of people. The promotion is free, and they put you on podparadise.com, which has over 5,000 visits a day from avid podcast listeners and is growing every day. Each day, Pod Paradise selects 5 podcasts to spotlight on their front page. Maybe yours could be there soon. Podserve's pricing is simple. Only $19 a month. That's it. No tiered pricing platform, just one low fee. For $19 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited podcasts, free podcast promotion, your podcasts on all platforms, detailed download analytics, one-on-one customer support. You pay month to month, and you can cancel at any time. And when you sign up, you get 14 days free. You don't even have to give them your credit card. I love their service so much I put a reminder in my phone to add my credit card when the 14 days was almost up. I couldn't give them my $19 fast enough. I'm telling you, I really didn't believe it until I actually signed up and saw my podcasts on everything from iTunes to Stitcher and Spotify and more in a ridiculously short amount of time. So if you've got a podcast and you don't have a hosting platform, I highly recommend podserve.fm. Check them out.
Hello, this is Rod Barnett. I'm the host of The Bloody Pit, the podcast that examines films from across the decades. On The Bloody Pit, we have several ongoing series of shows within the show focused on specific things in genre cinema that I and my co-hosts find fascinating. There's a long-running series focused on Italian maestro Antonio Margheriti's films from the 1960s all the way up through 1990. There's an on-again, off-again series focused on 1970s science fiction films. There's an in-depth look at the Western movies that William Castle made before he struck out on his own and became the horror auteur that we know and love. A look at the classic Coffin Joe films from Brazil, and our long-term project to look at every Universal horror film made in the 1940s. That's a long project, people. It's going to take us a long time. Sprinkled in amongst those are various other episodes focused on other stranger areas of cinema, like Lucio Fulci, Dario Argento, and even some obscure British crime films from time to time. So join me and my rotating crew of co-hosts as we examine the stranger side of cinema through an exploitation lens. Except when we don't? Yeah, you never really know exactly what to expect on The Bloody Pit. So join me for The Bloody Pit.
Prepare for a spine-tingling, nerve-shattering podcast featuring all your favorite monsters. You won't believe your ears when you listen to Monster Kid Radio. Hear your host, Derek M. Cook, and his ever-rotating stable of guests discuss your favorite classics and sometimes not-so-classic monster movies. Subscribe to Monster Kid Radio through iTunes or Stitcher, or visit monsterkidradio.net before the next weekly episode of Monster Kid Radio. Go through the archives for interviews with Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Joel Hodgson. Listen to discussions about movies like Creature from the Black Lagoon, Island of Terror, and King Kong. And don't forget convention coverage from Monster Bash and the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, Classic Monsters, Modern Talk, and the Head of Rondo Hatton, only on Monster Kid Radio.
Okay, so let's dive into the cast here. Now, the cast are pretty much all Italian actors, so that most of the listeners at this point won't know who they are, but genre fans will definitely know that Urbano Barberini, who he played George, I think he kind of looks like an 80s version of Jensen Ackles.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that.
I did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I'm watching it going, wait, it's Dean. Oh, no, it's not. It can't be. It's 1985.
Yeah.
But he was in Gore and Outlaw of Gore, and he had a small part in the Daniel Craig Bond film Casino Royale. He played a character named Tomelli.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to deep dive into the cast here today, but you might also recognize Fiore Argento, who plays Hannah. She is Dario Argento's daughter, and therefore she's sister to Asia Argento. She was also in Phenomena and Trauma, which are good Argento films, but she didn't really make too many beyond those.
Huh.
So getting into the film, the first thing I gotta say to you, Chris, is who brings a blind man to a movie?
Yes, yeah. When that came on, I was like, how does this work?
Right.
Yeah.
And every 2 seconds he's asking her to describe it to him. It's like, really?
Yeah, I thought that was quite amusing to see that.
It reminded me of a while ago. I picked up a little. It was like a Matchbox car kind of thing, and it was Daredevil's car. I'm like, he's blind. How can he drive a car? It just doesn't make any sense. I had to own it just for that reason. So the story, the pacing goes on really fast. I mean, once the demons start, and it turns out that either a bite or a scratch from the demon, sort of like the zombie rules in Night of the Living Dead,
Right.
You become one. And relatively quickly, too, within a matter of, like,
Yes.
a minute or two.
Yeah, and not to mention that, about like Night of the Living Dead, here, I noticed that we had the fast-moving zombies, which, again, we talked about with Night of the Living Dead. That's, whole other discussion, whether,
Right.
that's a good thing, a bad thing, whatever. But certainly, that's one of the things I noticed as well, is how quickly one was infected, and then quickly became a zombie.
But in this, though, too, it's fast that they're not actually zombies. They're demons.
True.
So for me,
Yes.
the fast motion didn't bother me.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I thought that there's one scene towards the end where I think it's Hannah. She's on her hands and knees. She's starting to turn into a demon, and it was an interesting transformation because at first she seemed normal, and then she's like, who are you? What am I doing here? Like, she starts to lose her memory and doesn't understand what's going on. And then little by little her face starts to change, which I thought was really interesting.
Yep.
And then she ends up, she full on, has the demon makeup with the veins on her cheeks and everything, is on her hands and knees, and then out of her back comes an actual, like a traditional demon-looking demon, like you would see from old etchings in old 1700 books of devils and demons and stuff. And it literally climbs out of her back, impossibly, because it's humanoid-sized.
Yeah.
And so that made me think that her body was used as a portal. Because, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way it could have been inside her.
Yeah, no. It, no, I thought, I was thinking the same thing as I was watching. I'm like, but I'm glad you differentiated, the demons versus zombies thing, because I kept looking at it as zombies, but now that you point that out, it makes a lot more sense as I'm, thinking about it and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, there was one thing I had read too about the glowing eyes, which I thought was a great effect. Apparently, Lamberto used like reflective paper. So I don't know how that worked. I mean, obviously you can't put paper on people's eyeballs,
Right.
so maybe they were like over their eyelids and they just had to walk with their eyes
Yes.
closed.
Huh. That's interesting. Yeah.
And there's that one scene where is it? There's a shot where the demons are coming up the stairs. It's before Hannah, the demon breaks out of Hannah's body, and they're coming up the stairs in this sort of semi-slow motion, and their shadows are creeping across the ceiling, but the shadows, the way the lighting is, the shadows are going towards the demons, and the demons are coming towards the camera.
Right.
And this fog and everything, it just looks, that's an iconic image from this film.
Right. Yes. Well, and also too, one of the things I noticed too is, to that point, you notice that a lot of the demons, they're actually backlit, and they come into the light whenever they're attacking someone from time to time.
Yes.
So
Yep.
I thought that was a
And I
nice
think that's
touch.
exactly how this
Yeah.
was too. Yeah, and they were backlit as they're coming up the stairs, and they're moving in this quasi slow motion, and it kind of reminded me of the slow motion vampires in the movie Blackula, which that scene. I don't know if you've ever seen
No, I
Blackula.
haven't, yeah.
You got to see that movie. There's a scene towards the end where there's these vampire ladies, and they're screaming, and they're running, and it's in slow motion, and it's terrifying. It just works, even though it's cheesy, and the makeup is cheesy, and like pretty much just their hands and face have
Sure.
makeup. It just somehow the slow motion and the terror, like at least when I was a kid, it worked, and I think in this situation too, it worked for me even this time around.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'm like, I'm looking at, several things, like several, screenshots and such from the movie, just sort of browsing, and I'm looking at the eyes a little more closely now that you talk about the reflectiveness. When, now that you pointed that out, you look at them right now, it's very evident how reflective the eyes are versus those of the human characters. That's again, it's one of those great things about being a filmmaker. Those little tiny details, they add so much to anything.
Right. Yeah, they just did a great job with this, and like I think even just the shots were just composed so well.
Yes. Yep, and of course, the use of colors in the light, like all the reds and all the different various gels or whatever you want to say, used in the lighting. It and the smoke just creates a lot of atmosphere. I
Right.
mean, that's one of the toughest things with doing a movie like this, where it's primarily in one location. So it's like, how do you take a movie that takes place in one location and still make it cinematic? And a lot of
Right.
that comes in with the lighting, the camera movement, and that sort of thing. And all that works well here because you're in a movie theater. How many angles can you possibly do and still keep it fresh? And thankfully, there are tons of ways that this keeps going and keeps being entertaining.
And I have to say, one of my favorite characters in this movie was Tony the Pimp.
Oh
He
yeah,
was awesome because he's the one who gets, even though he seems like a jerk at first, he calms the group down when they realize what's happening. He gets them to all work together once they realize they're under siege by the demons. And then he gets killed too early in the film, I thought. I was so sad to see him go. And he shows up, the actor shows up in a similar role in Demons 2. And Demons 2, if you haven't seen that, that's a really good one because it's basically about this apartment building, and the same film is playing on everyone's television, and the demons are literally coming out of the TV screen. Whereas in this, they kind of didn't. It had to do with the mask, and the girl got scratched by it and stuff. But in Demons 2, they actually physically come out of the TV screen, and that's pretty scary,
so they
too.
play this. So I haven't seen Demons 2. So they play the same movie that was here in this one on televisions as opposed to movie screens. Is that what it is?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, exactly.
Okay, interesting.
At least as far as I remember it. But yeah, that's how
That's
it goes. And
fascinating.
then so it's these people trapped in an apartment building, which is a little bit more space.
Yeah.
But the cinema was supposedly revamped or it was renovated, so it looked like it had maybe been an old factory at
Wow.
some point. So that's what I think. There was a lot of space, and I thought it was interesting that the projection booths were automated too. There was no actual projectionist.
Oh, that's
It's
true.
like you'd think there
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
someone, at least someone would be maintaining it in case something
Oh, sure.
happens.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in a way, you could argue that that was like sort of like, like almost like meant to be for some reason, like part of the horror of the story, that there is no person that's controlling this, and it's just like, all the patrons, yeah, they're on their own. So
Yeah, yeah, pretty
yeah.
much. No, I didn't. I was confused, not confused, but I thought that the chick in the green dress that was sort of like the escorting everyone into the theater. She was kind of seemed like she was running the show.
Yes.
The red curly hair.
Yes.
She ends up becoming a demon too, and I thought she was kind of in on what was going on.
Yeah.
So I didn't understand what her role was.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of thought the same. I'm like, okay, what's her role in this, and yeah, it didn't really seem to go in that direction as you would have thought it would.
Yeah, and I didn't get. I guess the whole thing was orchestrated by the dude with the half silver mask from the beginning, because
Yes.
he shows up at the end and tries to kill George and Cheryl.
Right.
So I guess he orchestrated the whole thing, but I wonder if there's something more to the story that they
That we
just
don't know.
didn't tell us
Right.
on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of the quick things about this movie. I thought the effects were top notch.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't think they looked very cheesy. They seemed well done and realistic.
Yeah, no, I felt the same. Again, there were like a few effects, like a couple like dummy shots and things like that, where I mean,
Yeah.
I mean that stuff was kind of cheesy, but but it was cool nonetheless. There's a charm to those kind of effects that like you forgive it. You're just like, okay, this is part of it. So and it works.
Right. One thing that I didn't quite get as a kid, and I enjoyed it more this time around, was the use of the rock and roll music in this movie. Like, for example, Billy Idol's "White Wedding." It's a great song,
Yeah.
gets me pumped, gets me going, but it doesn't really add to the mood. However, I thought, at least watching it this time around, it sort of firmly plants the film into the 80s.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you can say the same about almost any movie released during the '80s. That if it doesn't at least have that kind of soundtrack, then it just sort of not so much that it takes you out of it, but I mean, it's almost like with the '80s film like this, like you want to see that because it gets you in that mood. There's something about '80s music combined with the imagery of '80s movies that just inherently gives you some form of nostalgia, even for somebody like myself who didn't really live throughout the whole decade of the '80s, but nonetheless, it just it
Right.
just gives you that. It just hits you right. It just hits you right. Because it hits you with this nostalgia like right away.
Yeah, exactly. And then the scene where George is driving the motorcycle around in the theater and he's driving over the seats and stuff. They used a song called "Fast as a Shark," which I had never heard, but it works perfectly
Yes.
in the scene as he's riding around the theater with his sword slicing up the demons. So, overall, final thoughts on this movie, Demons. What did you think? Did you find it scary?
Didn't really find it as scary as I thought I would, but I mean, and again, I need to watch it again, in full and, really take in more of the details. But as a movie goes, I thought I had a lot of fun with it. It was just like a lot of fun, and, it was my first time seeing it, and it made me appreciate that sort of Italian filmmaking in this genre because you have movies like Zombie and Zombie 2 and those kind of things, and it really makes you appreciate that style, and at the same time makes me want to see more and discover more from that era.
Excellent. Yes, and I agree. And I think in future episodes we not only need to dive into more Italian horror films, but specifically the giallo films.
Oh yeah,
From Italy, which are a little different, but just as effective.
right, exactly.
Excellent. Yes, I found this terrifying. I like I said, at a young age, I watched it, and so it kind of scarred me, but in a good way.
Yes.
In those cinematic scars that just don't heal. But excellent. So I enjoyed this, and I recommend it to. Would you recommend it to a younger
I
audience?
definitely would. Yeah, I mean, I think again, going back to what we've talked about in past episodes, I think it's important for one to go back to these kind of movies to get a sense of, where all these things have come from, and and the influence that these filmmakers had on this generation.
Absolutely. I agree. And where can our listeners find you online, Chris?
Listeners can find me online on my website. It's storiesmotion.com. I am also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under Stories in Motion. There you'll find all my work, all the things I'm currently working on, currently doing.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
No, thank you.
All right, take care.
Take care.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this special edition episode of Then Is Now called 30 Days of Hallowtober. If you want to chime in on today's show, please send us an email at thenisnow42@gmail.com. And you can also check out our website, havenpodcasts.com. And we have another show called The East Meets the West, where we discuss spaghetti westerns and Shaw Brothers movies, so we hope you check that show out as well. As always, please leave us a review on iTunes so that more people can find us, and spread the word about Then Is Now. Join us again next episode.
Then Is Now podcast is intended for entertainment, educational, and informational purposes only. Sounds, music, and clips played during this podcast are the property of their copyright holders. All original content is copyright Jupiter Media.